Welcome back to episode 62. Episode 62 of Culper's Canteen Cup. I can't believe that we've already done 62 episodes. I can't believe we managed to keep this thing somewhat loosely together for 62 entire episodes. Hey, and if you're watching us on YouTube right now, we really appreciate it. Big shout out to Carlton's music. That's Alpha Child. Check him out at carltonzeus.com. You can get more of his music at Apple Music as well. Get over there, get clicks, and check him out. Also, if you're watching on YouTube, that there are only two of us today. Roger is busy stimulating the economy and his new future bug out house when society collapses. Roger's going to be living in an RV in the desert somewhere. So it's just looking at a day. So we got a lot of stuff in the news, a lot of stuff we want to talk about. A couple shout outs. My first shout out is going to be to Private First Class Dunlau of the Fort Bragg Military Police Office. Hey, I appreciate you.
Yeah.
Hey, brother, I appreciate you giving me, let me off with just a verbal warning for doing 45 and a 35. In my defense, the speed limit changes 3 times on that road in the span of a couple hundred meters, and you were sitting right behind the 35 mile an hour. To 35. So I will call your BS on that. But at the end of the day, you could have been a lot more. Than you were, so I appreciate you in respect. So I'm gonna throw it over to Luke for his shot. We'll get this thing started.
This is why we need little pieces of swag, even if it's like just a little business card or something, so that when a kid's cool like that, MP, and lets you off the hook, you say, "Hey man, give our show a listen," and maybe he'll head on over and listen. That would be funny. Then he'd hear the shout out. So, but yeah, I got one shout out to the old man, Herschel Jericho. His birthday was yesterday, and yesterday was so crazy for me. I barely got a chance to even reach out and say happy birthday. So happy birthday, Dad. Keep him going. Roger out buying an RV. Now, I used to say the only reason I would ever get an RV is to park it in front of my sister-in-law's house, stay there over Christmas with the Richie Rich neighbors, and empty the little potty into the sewer and have one of the neighbors come out and say, "Shitter's full." That's the only. I used to say that's the only reason I'd buy one, but as time goes on, our boy Chris has one. He has got a little smaller one. He sends out pictures, and I keep, the older I get, maybe it's an age thing. It's got to be an age thing, where I'm like, you know what, that seems pretty cool, man. Maybe not a RV, but fifth wheel or something. I don't know. So good luck to Roger with his lengthy purchase of that distance wise of that RV. Good Lord, man, traveling thousands of miles. He better got a good deal. But hey, enjoy and stimulating the economy, Roger. You're busy out spending your money. Josh and I are busy making ours. So we apologize. Roger's going to do the sound on this one. We apologize. We're going to keep our mics pretty much unmuted since it's the two of us. So apologize for all the feedback you're going to get. So yeah, we're gonna start off talking about Afghanistan. You may have heard about it over the past 20 some odd years. Went in there in 2001. We've been there ever since, and we finally made the decision, in my opinion, 16 years too late, to pull the majority of our troops out of there. Let's be real. There will be boots on the ground for a long time in Afghanistan somewhere. Back after Obama pulled the troops out of Iraq, guess what, folks? There were still boots on the ground there. Generally, it's not Green Army, 82nd Airborne, but somebody is there doing something. It's just the way it is. So I hate to break it to everyone, but there have been boots on the ground in Iraq since 2003, and it'll be the same with Afghanistan. So not everybody's going to be leaving, but the majority are, and all the partners are leaving too. Once they saw the U.S. was serious about it, I actually had a talk with the Dutch deputy chief of mission last night, and I said, "Hey, how's y'all's pullout going?" He's like, "When y'all leave, we leave." Basically, he's like, we're concerned about that. So the Germans are on the way out, the Dutch, you name it, go right down the line. Canadians, everybody's out of there. And as everybody's leaving, The Taliban, which I think Josh will get into when I pass it over to him, Taliban is gaining major ground and taking over critical transportation nodes. The Russians reported, you can't trust a Russian, what are you going to do? But the Russians said that the Taliban now control, I think, what, three quarters, either two-thirds or three-quarters of the Afghan Tajikistan border. That's something. And the Afghan Tajikistan border is where all the cowardly Afghan National Army are fleeing to. So I don't know what the Taliban are trying to do there, but keep them from going so they can kill them. I don't know. But I got a lot to say on this, but they're taking ground so fast, and I'm sure we'll bounce this one back and forth quite a bit, Josh, but they're taking ground so fast right now before we're even gone. It's really reminiscent to me of the Toyota Hilux Blitzkrieg of 1996, where the Taliban, went from Kandahar to Kabul in a very short amount of time, and it actually set military movement records at the time they moved so fast and took Kabul. So a lot to unpack on this one. A lot of emotions for me and Josh. We've both got more than a couple of deployments to that country, and we kind of have a Josh and I and Roger and probably three-quarters of the audience listening have a deep tie with that place. As I said, I mean, we've got deep ties with Alexander the Great's guys that were there and suffered, British Empire, even the Soviets, man. That's one thing historically I think that we feel we have in common with soldiers and warriors who have tried to take that place. At least Genghis Khan was smart enough to just kind of be like, we're just going to let Afghanistan do its own thing and just completely go north and bypass it. So good on Genghis Khan. So what do you think, Josh? You want to, I don't know, give us some background, some headlines. I know you had 4 pages of notes that the dog ate, but what do you think?
Yeah, no, man, you're right. There are a lot of emotions tied to Afghanistan. Afghanistan wasn't my first deployment, but I don't know, something about it was to avenge not just the history, and when they said we were free, when they said, all right, we're done, we're pulling out, there's a lot of emotions. And I've talked to a guys I work with, obviously spent a lot of time in Afghanistan, and there's a lot of frustration, anger, some realized and about it and everything. And I think all those feelings are justified. On one hand, you want to stay there, to deny them that operational time and space, attack the homeland again, never ever allow another 9/11 event to happen, that originates from there. But on the other hand, at a certain point, we put billions of dollars into that country, and I mean, they are basically in the same place they were on September 10th of 2001. I don't think they're any better. They're certainly not any more advanced. I mean, Afghanistan, it's the best I can describe it is like walking through the Bible. When I got there, it was like, man, this is what the Bible describes, and they're stuck in the Bronze Age, and I don't think they're ever going to come out of it. And at the end of the day, they have to stand on their own. They've had 20 years to figure it out. We've equipped them. We've done everything for them. But you can give them the best military hardware in the world. At the end of the day, you can't give them guts. And what's truly crazy when you think about it, we are going to kick this around a few times, man. I got a lot to say. Is Afghans? They are war, and that's why I don't understand why you've got the ANA surrendering by the thousands. Just, it's like, you guys have fought your entire life. It's different. So I think there's 3 things why Afghanistan, I think, is so hard to govern. One, it's because of its geographical, right? So it's between Iran, Central Asia, India. It's been invaded and settled so many times by so many different people. And not only do they hate all outsiders, they all hate each other. And anything that totally resembled any type of centralized government had been, they have railed against that hard. The Brits were in the, what was it, like the mid 1800s, and they feared that it's easier to do business with local rulers support than, to try and install, government that, is not, is that's, some foreign power or something. Um, I think you take a look at how Afghanistan, you saw this, and, a lot of our listeners saw this too. Is, dude, every kalat who haven't been, every kalat, every house is built like a little mini fortress. It's got an outside wall. There's usually one way in, one way out. And these walls are not, it's not like the wall in your house. I mean, these things are feet thick, stone and mud walls. And by and large, man, that's not something that's, you just can't punch your way through it. It's not sheetrock. So basically, you've got all these little mini fortresses within the graphic area. And then, like we were saying before we started, you were up in, Bagadan. And I mean, it is remote. The mountain ranges that are some of the biggest and most, jagged and steep in the world. And you've got, the Hindu Kush, which runs, right through the center of the country and down south and everything. And then you've, in Badakhshan around there, and the Pamir Not, you've got the Hindu Kush, the Pamir, the Tiashan, the Kunlun, and the Himalayas all meet up there, in Afghanistan. So you're talking about a country which is extremely rugged. There's so many different ethnicities running around there, and they all hate each other, and they all have weapons. So I don't think anybody's going to be able to roll in and subjugate Afghanistan. Anyway, not without some. You'd have to occupy every valley in that country, and that's just there's no country on earth.
It's difficult for a Western mind to comprehend, especially an American mind to comprehend. We're well known throughout the world, as we all know, as Americans, our love and mastery of geography. But after 21 years or 20 plus years of seeing the map of Afghanistan on your nightly news, you could probably tell me what Afghanistan kind of looks like. You might be able to tell me where it is. I'm sure I'm gonna give our audience the benefit of the doubt. But boy, I tell you, it's not really a country. Like Josh was saying, it's just a place where a bunch of tribes are. I think we covered in an earlier episode the hierarchy of what your average Afghan, if you can even call it an average Afghan, what their hierarchy of importance would be. And number one would be family, which is very close to number two, which is tribe. Number three might be Islam, maybe, but that hierarchy. I mean, Islam is not number one. I mean, it's just not. Maybe in the bigger cities, Kabul and places like that. But you get out, Badakhshan and up in outside of Mazar-e Sharif and Ghazni and places like that, man, most people don't pray 5 times a day. So number 4 would be, as far as their hierarchy, would be some, I said tribe, but maybe, okay. Number 3 is going to be ethnicity, okay? So tribe goes very close with ethnicity. So you got Pashtuns and Tajiks and things like that. And when I say hierarchy, I mean loyalty. So loyalty to family, loyalty to tribe, loyalty to ethnicity. Okay, and different things go into the ethnicity to include language and all these things. Number four is going to be, like I said, Islam, and number 5 would be any nebulous kind of weird idea of what they consider to be Afghanistan as a country. So there is no loyalty to country in Afghanistan, not among the majority of the population. Uh, the loyalty I just laid out for you is really how it is. And so Afghanistan as a country, we're going to liberate them with democratic elections. It's like your average Afghan doesn't care about a democratic election. They just really don't. And it breaks my heart to say that. You know, it shows me how much I've grown up over the years. Because that used to be one of the most important things in my life was I was there to see the first Afghan election, which ran kind of smooth, probably smoother than our 2020 election. But what are you gonna do? Yeah, back to the point of the geographical concerns, the remoteness and the violence. From Badakhshan, which is in the far northeast of the country, the Badakhshan province. Province is similar to a state. Badakhshan is that province that has there's a little dingleberry in Afghanistan that stretches way out and it has a 77-kilometer border with China. That's a long way from the province of Nimruz, which is in the southwest corner of Afghanistan. If you took somebody from Badakhshan and introduced them to somebody from Nimruz, they'd be like, I don't have much in common with this person at all. Whereas if you take somebody from Maine and introduce them to somebody from California, at least they'd speak the same language. They both consider themselves United States citizens. They might both respect the flag, maybe they don't, but they have common values, common law systems, things like that. They would have much more in common with somebody, than the previous example I just gave. It's such a splintered, fractured country, and it's a real challenge. Now, boy, yeah, we could probably spend the whole episode on this. Afghans also, you got to realize, and Josh will tell you this after being in Africa, they have a different mindset when it comes to the value of life. And I don't mean the value of someone else's life. I'm talking about the value of their own life. There's so much death. The life expectancy is so low, has been so low for generations there because of lack of medical care, exposure to elements. It's not necessarily the climate is rough throughout the entire country. There are nice times of year, but man, it's just a tough place to live. Life is short for them. And if you've seen those Afghans who are, I'm not even gonna say brave enough, but just the necessity requires them to ride their bicycle through the traffic in Kabul, life is cheap. They do not care, obviously, about their own life, And the explanation is, well, inshallah, right? Whatever, Allah willing. I'm either going to die or I'm not. So I'm just going to, without even looking both ways, go right out into this busy intersection in Kabul. I've seen a number of dudes get hit. And it's like, they just don't value their own lives. They don't have much to lose either. They don't go home every night to air conditioning and a nice meal, whatever they want to eat. It's day in, day out. I'm not saying their lives are worth it. I'm not saying that. They do value their families and their tribes, and they have deep bonds with each other. But man, they just don't have much to lose. So that may be an explanation of why they don't give up so easily. It's just not much to lose, and life is cheap, and inshallah, I struggle with this a lot, and I look back. I've been to Afghanistan a few times, like I said, and when I was there in 2005, things were going pretty well. 2004, 2005, things were going pretty well. I think Taliban was still mainly operating out of Pakistan at the time. They still had pockets everywhere. I know soldiers were killed, and I'm not saying that it was a truly peaceful time. It was a hell of a lot more peaceful than it was in 2011, 12, 13, 14. So I maintain we should have pulled out in 2005. I know we hadn't got bin Laden yet, but everybody knew bin Laden wasn't in Afghanistan. But then I asked myself and people, well, what would have been the result if we would have pulled out in 2005? Well, the Taliban probably would have taken over. There probably would have been a lot of bloodshed. Okay, fast forward 16 years later, 2021, and we pull out. What's the result going to be? The Taliban's going to take over, and a lot of lives are going to be lost. And this is the part where I shit all over the generals. I have very little respect for flag officers who had any sort of command in Afghanistan over the past 21 years, besides maybe McChrystal. McChrystal tried to change the paradigm, but it was too late, and knives were out for that guy anyway. You know, a plan could have been hatched to pull troops out, keep a battalion of Rangers in there with a full complement to ensure that it wouldn't be a launching pad for future attacks on Afghanistan. But it would have to be understood that, man, if the Taliban comes in and strong arms the government and they all quote unquote vote to go back to Sharia law type rule, it's not Sharia, it's real strict. Taqiyya, I can't remember the term for it, but that's strict government by Quran, where everyone wears blue and all that stuff. Fine, hey, you guys do you, man. Just don't attack us from here. And we're going to keep this battalion of Rangers here with a full complement to make sure it doesn't happen. Now, on the surface, maybe that'll work, maybe not. I'm not a general, though. You know, you give me a whole staff, and I'll come up with a plan that would be a hell of a lot better than the one we're doing now. So, I don't know. It's just we're watching it fall apart in front of our faces, and you know, you really have to dig for coverage on this. You're not really seeing it in the mainstream media. They're more concerned with January 6th and, you know, all this other stuff. You know, but I dig deep into it. I encourage all of you to dig deep into it also. I did not get to see Joe Biden's press conference the other day. Josh, what were your thoughts on his press conference talking about this?
So while he was speaking, he to the teleprompter. You could tell he was on teleprompter. His speaking was robotic, and but once question and answer session hit, he and you know a couple of things that somebody wrote for him. He said, "I don't want to send another generation of to die in Afghanistan, America's sons and daughters to die in Afghanistan." And I was like, okay, yeah, I can respect that. But, again, once you got to the Q&A session with him, he was on his heels. One of the reporters asked, what did the IC, meaning the intelligence community, assess that the Taliban takeover of Afghanistan is, and you know how Joe Biden gets when he doesn't like the question, and he feels like he's being challenged. He got angry and he started that old man kind of angry yell, and he's like, "Not true!" Like he pointed his finger and shut him down. Raised his voice, and he was like, "That's not true. That's not what they said. That's a lie." And grr. And by and large, it was just like, "Hey, we're leaving," and that's and that's it. There was. I don't know, man. It was just, it was it could have been an email. It was one of those meetings like, you could just put this in an email, dude. Everybody a lot of time, but you're the president and you got to get up there and, you got to show it. But when you go back, for him to say that the takeover, of Afghanistan by the Taliban is not inevitable, just it doesn't go with the facts. And here's a few that say, yes, this is absolutely what is going to happen. It is inevitable, and it's probably going to happen a lot faster than everybody thinks it will. It may be even faster in 2006, maybe just as quick as, ISIS moved into North. So Afghan's defense minister Bismillah Mohammadi, so he's consolidating Afghan security forces, and he put out not necessary to defend every district center. We're going to consolidate, security force, to be able to maintain the fight. Okay, well, that right there, anybody who has an inkling of reading comprehension and military knowledge, hey, we are willing to give away parts of the country. So the Taliban, they don't have to seek refuge in, the federally administered tribal areas anymore, across the border to fight. Now they can seek refuge in, in Ghazni. They can seek refuge in Kandahar, Kunduz, and all those other places. You're still going to have U.S. Embassy personnel in Kabul. There'll never be a scenario of in Kabul like there were in Saigon. I don't know, Joe. I don't know
about that.
Yeah, and then of course some of the Afghan army folk, generals are coming out and they're like, we'll survive, this is going to work, and blah blah. But earlier, the Taliban take you places along the border with Tajikistan. Well, the Shirkan border crossing up north in Kunduz, and it's on the border with Tajikistan. Well, on June 22nd, border guards and the Afghan government troops that were up there left the border and went into Tajikistan. Pakistan has now mobilized their military to go down there, stop the Afghan National Army from coming across the border to keep them in Afghanistan. Yeah, right. So, dude, it's crazy. And so the interesting thing, so they took over the border crossing, but they didn't shut it down. Now the Taliban are using the border and they're taxing everything that comes across. So hey man, I've got a U.S. built, baked in money generator for me. And one of the other things that they did was, before, when you brought goods in Afghanistan through that border crossing, they give you this little, they gave you a pass, a receipt that, was good for that border crossing. But when you got to the next district, or you went outside that province and crossed into another province, you had to get a new permit from the. So you were taxed again, and you were taxed all the way to wherever your goods were going. The Taliban have issued a permit stamped with Islamic Emirate.
Yep.
It's good for any destination within the borders of Afghanistan.
And people like that.
People like that. Even this guy's like, yeah, I don't like the Taliban, but they're not taxing me, multiple times. I get taxed one time and that's it. And you know what? Hey, you gotta thing, but you go back and you look, that's the same thing ISIS did. Okay, here's your one permit, and it is good throughout the caliphate. It's not, hey man, it doesn't stop at state lines. Oh no, that's not good here. You got to get a new one.
Is it? What is it about us that we can't figure out how insurgency? Why can't
I don't know.
We've had a long time to figure it out.
Yeah. So the Taliban have taken 79 out of the 210 districts, all of them within major areas. Is now, they took Panjwai. The second Kandaks, for anybody who doesn't know, that's the Afghan commandos. They actually stood and fought the Taliban until they were black on ammo and almost black on water, which means they were out of ammo and they were almost out of water, and before they had to retrograde. National Army has surrendered in droves, and anybody, this, a lot of our listeners know this too, man. Afghanistan, at the end of the day, the Taliban aren't going to go in and murder everybody. They're going to go in and they're going to give folks the option. Hey, guess what? You either join us or you're not going to live. So, take your choice. One of the key things they're doing is they are starting up north first. They are starting up north. They are trying to prevent that Northern Alliance, type scenario that they had to deal with last time they were in power. So I don't know if there's not a Northern Alliance in Afghanistan and the Taliban is, fully in power. It's going to be what it is, and I guarantee you, the U.S. there.
The more we talk about this, the more. It seems like they have a workable plan, and don't get us twisted, folks. I mean, the senior Taliban leadership, down in Pakistan, soon to be in Kandahar, are not fools. They're intelligent men. A lot of them educated in the West. Your average Taliban foot soldier, mind you, that's what we're talking about. It's like this who's just. Wow, not much going on upstairs. Fearless fighter, hard fighter, knows the country, but man, that guy's not the one shaping Taliban policy. And get it right, the Taliban is okay. Let me back up. In the United States, we have basically two parties. Let's be real, two parties: Democrat, Republican. The rest of the world has generally more than two parties. You know, the British have like four. You know, here, over here, there's, you know, five or six, and they all sit in parliament, and they're all legitimate parties. They're called different things, but they, you know, have different agendas, and they all get together and agree on things and do, you know, there's something to be said for a parliamentary system. I love ours, but parliamentary system, there's something to be said for them. Now, the Taliban within Afghanistan, this is part of the negotiations that are going on in Doha and all these other places, is that they're a legitimate political party. I mean, they want a seat in the Afghan parliament. And they're like, look, we have the support. Why don't we just vote on it? And we'll see how many seats we get. And the U.S., you know, everybody's like, no, 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 we can't do that. And they're like, why not? We have a beef here. That's their beef. That's one of their beefs. Okay. You have to put all of this in that sort of context, how they are, yes, they're taking territory. They're, you know, putting the, you know, their little multi-pass, you know, so you're not taxed all the way. They're getting the support of the public in those areas. Anyone who goes against them is going to die. And your wife better be dressed in her blue burqa. But hey, man, we're going to try to make life easier for you. And a lot of Afghans said during the Taliban times, for a lot of them, things were easier. So they're gaining the support of the people. There is no political party called the Northern Alliance in Afghanistan. You know what I'm saying? So Josh is right. Starting up north, it's like, hey, we're legit. We've been talking. Let's put this to a vote, but let's secure those areas so that, you know, we don't get, you know, and I can't even remember all those General Dostum and all those folks.
Oh yeah.
And you know, all those folks to band together to stop this before it starts. Now, Josh and I and Roger, we haven't put it to a bet yet, but been having discussions, you know, on what we think's going to happen. So I'll give you my prediction, two-pronged prediction on what I think's going to happen. If the Taliban doesn't get their way before the winter, and their way being, we want a legit seat in parliament. Let's put it to a vote, put us on the ballot, and so we can have representation. If they don't get what they want, if they get what they want, then they get what they want. It's all good. They won't cede territory though. They will not do that. We're talking about a totally different. This is hard for a lot of minds to wrap their heads around. I understand if you haven't been there, but they won't cede territory, but they'll have seats, and they'll tell people who to vote for. Somebody trying to call me right now. Can you believe that during the show?
The audacity.
Anyway, the audacity. So, so no, I'm saying they will not get what they want. My prediction is Josh and Roger are doom and gloom, but the Taliban, geez, this guy won't take the hint. Sorry, guys. So anyway, he's breaking my train of thought. I'm gonna have to whoop up on that dude. So I think they'll take Kandahar first and have administrative control over Kandahar and say, you're not giving us what we want, we're going to take it by force. They'll wait out the winter because the winters in Afghanistan are notoriously tough. And then comes Ramadan. And Ramadan ends, the Eid celebration ends, I believe, about the middle of May of 2022. And once Ramadan ends, there will be an all-out assault, three-pronged, from the east, south from Kandahar, and down north from those provinces that Josh was just asking about. Josh was just telling us about. That's my prediction. So May, June 2022, full-on assault on Kabul, unless they can, if things don't change, that's the way it's going to be, in my opinion, unless the talks yield some kind of, you know, some kind of solution. That's how I see it going. What about you, Josh? How you see it going?
So I think they take Kabul before winter. And by take Kabul, I mean cut it off entirely. And basically, you know, it's going to be a siege. They have to take Canada, though. That's
Spiritual capital.
Yes, spiritual capital of the Taliban. That's where, you know, Mullah Omar was, you know, his palace or whatever. They have to take Kandahar. I don't think now that they have surrounding Kandahar in their hands. They control the border crossings, and they control Route One, which anybody who's seen a map of Afghanistan or been there, Route One, Highway One, is basically that runs big circle around it just inside Afghanistan. All has to basically go down that. If it doesn't, then off road somewhere, it's going to be on tertiary roads, but that is the main supply line. That is your main supply route, your MSR. Once they control that, then again, I can turn on and off the flow of goods and necessities into your city, and just like Putin does to Eastern Europe during the winter, ain't not a problem if you don't submit to my demands. Hey man, no blankets because you're going to be cold. So yeah, I think they take Kandahar very soon, probably next week or two. Like you said, the winters are definitely brutal. I don't see them assaulting Kabul or doing anything like that in the winter time. It's just not feasible. I mean, they'll fight if they need to, but by and large, man, Haji does not want to fight in Afghanistan in the winter. It's brutal there. It is truly, truly brutal. So the last I have to say about Afghanistan is, I think that is, I don't like the fact of why we had to go there. I'd rather not have seen, 3,000 Americans murdered. But in a way, man, it's just like there's something about that place that I'm glad that I got to go stand, on that ground, like you were talking earlier with, the same as Alexander the Great and all the others that, that traverse through there. I think that is a common bond, even on our book, when you wrote, I mean, we all have stories, the hoplites, Mongols, everybody, we all have stories and share some of that bond, but as far as Afghanistan goes, we did everything we possibly could to their success. We more American lives there, schools, hospitals, we built their police force, their air force, their military, everything. They've had 2 decades to stand on their own. We didn't fail them. People are saying we're failing them by leaving. We failed them by leaving Baghdad in the middle of the night. We didn't fail them. Fail those people. We did not fail the Afghan people. Folks went out. We did our job. We placed ourselves in. And like I said before, man, you can give them everything, but you can't give them the guts to fight. That's just one thing they have to do on their own. They have up to tyranny, and if not, then they'll just live under tyranny, and that's okay, because you know what, the world needs dictators too. I'll say the last thing I'm saying on Afghanistan, by then Senator Charlie Wilson, and anybody who's seen Charlie Wilson's War, the movie or read the book, know that Charlie Wilson was a driver behind arming the Mujahideen in the 80s with Stinger missiles, so we could kill Soviets and shoot Hinds out of the sky, which was amazing and glorious, and I would have loved to have been a part of that. But in the end, we screwed it up, and Charlie Wilson's quote, it rings true today, just as it rang true when the last Soviet crossed Friendship Bridge, and they closed out their folly into Afghanistan, which is kind of ironic because we were supposed to make that their Vietnam. Here we are 2 decades. Said these things happen, they were glorious and they changed the world, and then we fucked up the end game. So that's all I have to say on that.
That sounds familiar in our military careers and going forward. Sounds very, very familiar. You got to define the end game first. I will read a quote before I share my last couple of thoughts on Afghanistan by the great British soldier, philosopher, poet Rudyard Kipling. And Rudyard Kipling said in a poem about Afghanistan, "When you're wounded and left on Afghanistan's plains, and the women come out to cut up what remains, just roll your rifle and blow out your brains and go to God like a soldier." It's madness, dude. Afghanistan's madness, and Rudyard Kipling really uh, wrapped it up there. There's a great movie called The Beast. It has one of the Baldwin brothers in it. It was a low budget, kind of low budget, but it's about some Soviet tankers who get lost in Afghanistan. And man, dude, that's a good movie. It's a good movie because it shows you it's like, oh, dude, and it's just so hopeless. And it covers a lot of things that we experienced in Afghanistan. You know, and I bet you anything that Marcus Luttrell learned Nanawate from that movie because that movie hit Nanawate way before Marcus Luttrell. That movie came out in like the 90s, I think. So it's a good one. It's called The Beast. Have you seen that, Josh, before I share my
Dude,
closing thoughts?
I haven't seen it, but I wrote it down because I'm going to check it
Oh,
out.
it's good, man. It's interesting. You'll enjoy it. I encourage y'all to check it out and see if you can find it on Amazon or Netflix. I doubt it's on Netflix, but it's a good one. Check it out. So one of the differences between the United States, and y'all got to keep this in mind going forward for posterity's sake. The difference between us, Genghis Khan, Alexander the Great, the British Empire, and I'd say even the Soviets for their interests, is I think that we did not, no, I don't think it's the truth. We didn't go there to conquer territory. We went there naively thinking we could make it better after we had tamped down on Al Qaeda there. And we were just wrong, or we didn't execute it properly. But $9 trillion later, I'm with Josh. I think it was a great adventure. I know that my buddies and I did our fair share to try to bring joy into certain people's hearts, and I saw smiles on children's faces for things that we did for them, and some families and guys we worked with. We did bring joy and some bonds of friendship there. So we didn't go to conquer. Maybe a little naive. And I see rumblings in the media and some reports about how the Chinese are chomping at the bit to come in there and fill the power vacuum. And I'm like, bring it on, Xi. Bring it on. You know what? You want to be a super powerhouse, superpower in the world, hyperpower? Bring it on. Your turn's next. Maybe you can crack the code, but I doubt it. You're going against thousands of years of history here. So if they're fool enough to go into Afghanistan, go ahead. But I guarantee they'll cause a lot more suffering than we did. All right, Josh, what do you want to talk about next, man? You want to talk about
Yeah,
CRT, Capitol Police, NSA?
dude. So
What do you want to talk about?
there's much. So we're coming out of Afghanistan. So and we just celebrated our nation's Independence Day, and I think we can roll straight after this CRT garbage. But one of the things as we sat on Independence Day, celebrating our nation's freedom, celebrating our hard-fought won independence, to see something that I saw and read coming out of elected officials who have never been to Afghanistan, who have never had to, who some of us have seen, who've never done the things some of us have, to sit here from their position of privilege and talk about how bad the United States is, to talk about how terrible, to talk about how our flag is a symbol of racism and oppression. And that, I tell you, it just, I mean, it buttresses what we've been saying, since episode one, is that there are a large number of people in this country who hate the United States. And unfortunately, a large number of those people are elected officials, and they're sitting in Congress and they're making our laws. You had Representative Cori Bush out of the 1st Congressional District of Missouri come out and say, quote, when they say that the 4th of July is about American freedom, remember this: the freedom they're referring to is for white people. This land is stolen land, and black people still aren't free. End quote. Well, Cori Bush, I guess being an elected member of Congress, having a net worth of 2 million documentary means you're oppressed. Well, if that's the case, if that's the oppression is, I wish somebody would oppress the shit out of me. $2 million. I might even like to be. I might like to have my own Netflix documentary. And then you take Maxine Waters, which we all know that insane. She comes out and she rumbles on about how the white man's keeping her down too, even though she's been in Congress how long, and she's got a net worth of over 10 million. Yeah, you're pretty oppressed. The Black Lives Matter Utah chapter flag, right? And this is a quote: "When we see this flag, we know the person flying it is not safe to be around. We know the person flying it is a racist." So, and we talk say this, and because I know we had discussed this when we all have our places, and we should be able to discuss them civilly, but we go back about this. Some of the things that made us American, at the end of the day, it's like we or disagree. At the end of the day, the flag, that's what gave us those common bonds as an American. Our shared beliefs, our shared values, that our nation is good, that the Constitution is good. It may not have been, we're still living up to the ideals enshrined in it, and we're still applying them, and it hasn't always been perfect, but the core is good. And here you have the left tearing down those, which once those are gone and those no longer carry that same value, you have nothing. And then what's going to happen? We're going to become the Balkans, or, like you were talking about earlier, we're going to become a place like tribal. And that's not, that leads nowhere good. So
with Representative Cori Bush, if you came at her and said you're worth 2.5 million, this year elected representative, you're a success, how are you oppressed? And she's like, well, I'm not oppressed, but you are. And that remind other minorities who she thinks are oppressed. That kind of reminds me of a Ronald Reagan quote. I'll change it up a little bit. When the government tells you to be oppressed, lie down and be oppressed. And that's exactly what's going on. They're telling whoever they think their constituency is, that they are oppressed, and it's someone's fault, and it's the other's fault. And what I struggle with, I read those stories that Josh was talking about on July 4th. I'm overseas, I'm by myself, feeling sorry for myself, and icing on the cake with that one is, I see these stories, people saying as elected representatives, looking in the rearview mirror, not looking forward, and saying we are rotten to the core, and our founding documents are rotten. Therefore, I don't know. I get pretty down, and I was messaging my daughter back and forth. I had a couple whiskeys, and she was in Nashville. I think, yeah, she was in Nashville, partying it up for July 4th, long weekend there. And I was saying, the country's going down the jitter. And she's like, she cheered me up because she's like, doesn't look that way from where I'm standing. There's people waving flags, singing the national anthem, smiling at each other, fireworks going off. Everybody's having a good time, wearing red, white, and blue. She was just saying it doesn't look that way from my perspective. So sometimes I got to, I'm looking forward to getting back to the States and, getting away from this 30,000 foot perspective that I've been having for the past 4 years, and really get to know my neighbors and get into the community and start getting involved. And I'm really looking forward to that because it's not all doom and gloom. Sometimes it seems that way with our stupid elected leaders. But one thing I really want to talk about, because it's in the news a lot, and I'm not going to say I'm going to educate you, but I'm going to give you a perspective on a certain thing that seems to be a hot button issue right now, that the left is simultaneously pushing and stepping from, if that makes any sense. Now you might have heard of something called critical race theory and how it's being taught in the schools. And to break down just basically what critical race theory is before getting too far into the weeds on it, actual critical race theory is something that is taught in law school, and it applies specifically race to how laws have been crafted and how justice is meted out based on race. And it's actually a really complicated study. And it's not something that can be taught to even a high schooler because they don't have the concept of how the justice system works. They just have basic government, stuff like that. So when someone comes to you and tells you that critical race theory is being taught in the schools, that is not accurate. And I'll tell you why. Josh just distracted me. Josh and Roger are way better at dealing with distractions during the podcast than I am, man. My brain just doesn't work. So let's just get back. So now stick with me. Critical race theory itself is not being taught in the schools. And that's what, Joy Reid on MSNBC and all these pundits are saying is like, they're not teaching critical race theory in the schools. They teach that at law school. So they are correct to a point, but they're obfuscating terms, okay? What came out of the critical race theory movement, it traces its roots all the way back to what's called the Frankfurt School. That's in Frankfurt, Germany, where a group of political scientists, philosophers, economists got together and came up with a way of looking at the world. And boil it down real simply, that anytime you're referring to the Frankfurt School, it's going to be overwhelmingly Marxist thought. And it's going to be class-based type thought, class and race-based. You start breaking that down and you get something called intersectionality, which is who's being oppressed and by whom and for what reason. So critical race theory, which is taught in the law schools, has roots in the Frankfurt School, which has roots in Marxism. So inevitably, you're going to get to intersectionality and who's being oppressed. So now let's back up and talk about theory. There's, critical race theory is a social theory, political socioeconomic theory. The same way that the theory of general relativity is a theory. Okay? Now there's something called, general theory of relativity. Let's stick with that for a second. So our modern GPS, you maybe have a GPS in your car, you have a GPS on your phone, things like that, if it's hooked to the satellites. Now you got satellites. The way GPS works, for those of you who've been in a cave for the last 30 years, there's a constellation of satellites up there that communicate with each other and communicate with base points on the ground. If you have a GPS system, that system is pinging off those constellations of satellites. You're going to need more than 3 location on the ground. So all 3 satellites, basically, it's more complicated than this, are moving in space at tens of thousands of miles an hour in orbit, and they're beaming down and bouncing that information off each other and off your device to pinpoint your location on the Earth. Okay, this is where the general theory of relativity comes in. General theory of relativity has never been proven. Okay, it's never been proven because we can't travel at the speed of light and observe. All we can do is test the theory and see if it jives with the outcomes of your experiments. So the theory holds up. It's not a law, it's a theory. Now this is hard science we're talking about though here, folks. So it's not a proven theory yet. We use something called praxis in the satellites in orbit to communicate with that GPS. So we take the theory itself and we put the theory into practice in these satellites that, because time moves differently the faster you're moving. So they have to fudge it a little bit so that they'll get on the ground. So the time, say there's a stopwatch in that satellite up in space, and you got a stopwatch on the ground. They apply the general theory of relativity into their formulas that the satellite works off of, and those stopwatches are not going to keep time the same way. It's hard to comprehend sometimes, but that is called praxis, when you apply a theory to actual instruction. So this is where we get back to critical race. What they're teaching in the schools and what you're seeing is not actual critical race theory. It's critical race theory put into practice. So it's praxis is what they're doing, what some of these school districts are doing. So we have come up, well, we haven't. I ripped this off somebody. I'm not going to tell you who, but I was like, that completely encapsulates what they're doing in some of these school districts with respect to critical race. They're not teaching critical race theory. I want you to pay very close attention. They are using critical race applied principles. Critical race applied principles. They're teaching crap. Now, I know that's funny, but it's true. They're applying the principles of intersectionality to what they're teaching in the schools. So I've seen a number of examples of this online, where in a math class, they're applying these principles to every single discipline, geography, science, math. And the way they do this is that, the one that comes off the top of my head, and it's awful. There was a math problem for like an eighth grader, and it said something like, Steve has been arrested 3 times. And it's like Steve, a white male, has been arrested 3 times. Qualik, in 1 year's time. Qualik, a black male, has been arrested 18 times in the past year. What is the percentage of how many times Qualik got arrested over Steve? Now you see what they did there, and that was an actual. Somebody took a photo of the problem, posted it on Twitter, and it just went ape. It's little things like this, and they're applying these principles to like math problems. They're like, well, what's the problem with that? I'll tell you what the problem with that is. How about I start putting together math problems like, if Jesus Christ, the Lord and Savior, fed 5,000 people, how many loaves and fishes would it take so that each person got 2 loaves and 1 fish? That you're not teaching Christianity, but you're applying the teachings of Christianity to a math problem. That is exactly what's going on. Don't let these people obfuscate and say critical race theory. That's just foolish. It's not being taught in the schools. And you're like, no. Critical race theory is not being taught in the schools. They're using critical race applied principles. And don't ever, if you get in a conversation with somebody on Facebook or Twitter or in person, don't ever call it crap. Let them figure that out. But use the term critical race applied principles, because that's what it is. They're trying to brainwash these kids in certain school districts, not everywhere. And I guarantee this stuff ain't happening in Amarillo, Texas or Lubbock, Texas. I can tell you that right now. But yeah, I got worked up over that, Josh. I had to give my little spiel on critical race applied principles, and I've just had enough, man. I've had enough.
No, man, it's good. I down with using the GPS, and it actually makes more sense to me. I was chatting about it because I was trying to wrap my head around it. Like I'm up there, and to put something new in, I got to take something out. But when you go back, where did Mao start the Cultural Revolution? Mao started. That's where it began. So did Hitler. You take a look at, a lot, these despot dictators that we've had. They started in the schools, right? It's a generational thing. You start there, and then you can do whatever you want. Why? Because by and large, young people, not all, but the majority of young people, and I'm talking about young people generally 25 and younger, they are very, emotionally driven. They base a lot of their decisions on emotions because that prefrontal cortex hasn't fully developed. And so if I can get these 18, 20, 22-year-olds fired up and get them indoctrinated, they've already, and they started that indoctrination back in, elementary school. Well, once they reach voting age, I have an entire generation of of voters that are baked in. I've got a brand new base, and that's exactly what they're doing. Just again, anybody who's not just for this, but for China at large, go back and take a look at the Cultural Revolution, and take a look at May 1960, 1960. 566, and when Mao started the and it's absolutely terrifying. It's absolutely scary how it started there, and then the parallels that you can derive by taking a look at our own education system. This critical race applied principle that that Luke just broke down Barney style for everybody. Even I could understand it. You couple that with what we're I sent you guys that article on the Capitol Police, right?
Yeah.
So
I think, yeah.
So the Capitol Police, the United States Capitol Police, I had to get educated on what the Capitol Police did. I thought their jurisdiction and everything was literally just the U.S. Capitol. That's what it's like. You're the Capitol Police. You protect the Capitol. You stand inside and make sure that people of paintings or whatever that they're not supposed to take pictures of, because God forbid ruin the photography, and make sure kids aren't trying to climb on George Washington statue in the rotunda. But no, the more I dig into the Capitol, the scarier it is, and the more becoming more and more conservative, if there is such a thing. So States Capitol Police is approximately 2,500 employees. There's approximately 1,800 actual sworn officers, and they have an annual budget of about $515 million. So that's, it is not significant. They're So after of course, after the January 6th riots, which the left is now touting as an insurrection to try and topple the United States government as we know it,
real quick, not a single person has been charged with insurrection in that Capitol riot. Not a single person.
Correct, because there's some the word I'm looking for, the level at which you need to, the bar is very, very high. It's much like the like for espionage. Like espionage is not an easy charge to to get somebody on. That bar is very high. And nobody's been charged.
So we shouldn't just, I know what you're saying. We shouldn't just throw that. So therefore, we shouldn't just throw that term around like the media is, the insurrection, right? Because that's pretty stiff charges, right?
Yeah, that's not a term you should throw. It's like calling somebody a Nazi or a racist. It's not something you should use lightly. You call everybody a Nazi, then nobody's a Nazi, right? That's one thing. Right. Insurrection is, anyway. I'm still curious, and before I don't want to get too sidetracked, but I'm still curious. I really, really want to know the guy in the Viking helmet and the goat skin throw on his shoulders. He looked like Jon Snow from Game of Thrones, walking around. Was he going to be president, or was he going to be like pro? I don't know. Speaker of the House. What was he going to be? I really want to know what that dude was going to be. In this insurrection.
What was his end game?
So the Capitol Police, in response to that, I saw an article. The Capitol Police are now opening up offices in Tampa, Florida, and San Francisco, California. Which maybe it obviously for two reasons. One, first is like the Capitol Police, the United States Capitol Police. How are they opening up offices in different states? One, and then two. Once I found out, okay, well, that's where the majority of threats originate against members of Congress in Florida and California. Being a native Floridian, I get it because I mean they're Floridians, right? You got Florida man and everything, and then California, they poop on the streets and they poop inside the CVS, and Target shutting all down every single store it has in San Francisco because California, quite frankly, is a shithole. So it gave me pause because I was like, well, I thought that was the purview of the FBI, investigative crimes against federal employees and members of Congress and stuff. Well, they can, but the Capitol Police and when I dug into it, they're not subject. Why? Because under code, they are not an. They are simply a part of the legislative branch by law, which they're not subject to the Freedom of Information Act. So you have entity branch who is part of the people who make the laws, who are not susceptible to the Freedom of Information Act. Wow. And so the Ananda Pittman stated that more branches of the Capitol across the United States coming months. Which, again, that should really make everyone and think. Why would the Capitol Police, who, again, not subject to FOIA requests, not subject to anything, be allowed to do that? Me personally, if I was governor, if I was Ron DeSantis of Florida, I would tell them, no, you are not. The Federal Bureau of Investigation is more than capable. Will fully cooperate, with their investigation, whatever they need to do to, keep members of Congress from winding up like Republican Steve Scalise, who was shot by a crazed Bernie Sanders supporter at the congressional baseball game. But you're not opening up an office in my state to do intelligence collection. We've seen what's happened with the FBI, with them being given a criminal law enforcement hat. It does not lead anywhere good. It is not positive, and everybody should be writing letters to their representatives and Santa Claus, telling them idea, and if they support it, then they feel at the ballot box come up. This is, I don't know, man. This is not good.
No, it's not. I mean, we got to keep a real close eye on this one because I haven't done as much research into the Capitol Police as Josh had. But again, this bears some close watching because if they're not subject to Freedom of Information Act requests, a FOIA request, where's the accountability? And I'm sure I could answer my own question on that. Like, okay, so they're part of the legislative body. So who are they accountable to? What authority do they use to arrest someone? It is odd. And I was struck the same way as Josh, kind of, where I'm like, okay, Florida and California, did we need this before? And why do we need it now? Oh, it was January 6th, insurrection. I don't call that an insurrection. I call it a riot. I think that those people, broke in there and broke things and did property damage and hurt police. I think that they definitely should be punished, but I do not think that they were insurrectionists at all. I feel the same way about, the Judge Kavanaugh hearings. The reason they're saying, the pundits and the politicians, Maxine Waters of this world will say that, well, the reason it was an insurrection, quote unquote, is because they were trying to disrupt the certification of the electoral votes. Okay, fair enough. What about when they were trying to disrupt Kavanaugh's confirmation hearing? They're trying to get in that building too. I mean, come on, man. I mean, let's be consistent. And I could go down the laundry list of stuff. What about the 4-month-long siege of a federal building in Oregon? What about that? People lost work because of that. Government couldn't get his job done because of that. All I'm saying is, man, grain of salt time, man. Prosecute those poor, bumbling fools who went inside that Capitol and now we're going to be felons and are not going to be able to vote. Because I don't care if all you did was walk in, they're going to prosecute you for that, and that's going to be a felony. And now you can't vote. So, I asked myself, what would I have done? I guarantee I would not have gone in that building. I would not have gone in that building. Maybe when I was 25, I would have. I may have. Because, man, I was full of piss and vinegar when I was that age. And maybe I would have made a stupid decision and gone in there. Man, don't get caught up in the mob, people. Just don't do it. And I think our audience is more discerning than that. But man, it's time. It's time to be smart. It's time to make informed decisions. It's time to really dig into these stories because some of these things, I'm not a conspiracy guy. We did our conspiracy podcast. It was like our fourth or fifth one. I tend to, go with Occam's razor, with what I call Paul's corollary, which is, the simplest explanation requiring the least amount of assumptions is probably the case. And Paul's corollary is, and the stupidest possible explanation is probably the right one. You put those two together, people just being boneheads, in other words. Somebody made a mistake and they were a freaking bonehead. But, I see, I talked about $9 trillion over, we throw around trillions these days like it's nothing, but man, that is just so much money. $9 trillion, a war on terror, whatever you want to call it, Operation Enduring Freedom, Iraqi Freedom, Operation ISIS, going up to $9 trillion. You think people are just going to want to stop spending that money? You think that organizations are going to want to stop using the platforms and the capabilities that they've developed over the past 20 years just because we're not in Afghanistan or Iraq anymore? I listen to some of these people, they try to get, a lot of listens and shares and likes on their podcast, not necessarily talking conspiracy theories, but talking this and that. But one of the themes I hear is, you're starting to see the beginnings of a war on terror turned inward. And when you get, the Lincoln Project saying, the guy in the Lincoln Project can't recall his name off the top, but he said in no uncertain terms, January 6th was worse than 9/11. And more people will end up dying because of January 6th than 9/11. And I'm just like, the guy knew what he was saying when he said that. Both sides are trying to get all worked up. And I encourage those of you who listen to this podcast, don't get all worked up. Don't get all worked up. Be discerning, be smart, be reasonable, talk to each other, get involved in your community, get involved with each other, and start, really question what's going on. I work for the federal government, and I can guarantee you right now, I'm not just going to go along with your rights being taken away. It's just not going to happen. So there are those of us in the federal government, like maybe a whistleblower, Josh, that maybe you want to talk about next, who saw something that didn't look right. And I don't know if whistleblower is the right term, but did share a little information with a well-known Fox News host that maybe we can dissect now. This Capitol Police thing gives me the creeps, and I need to research it more, especially after what Josh said. I don't think I've ever seen. I look at USA Jobs every day just to see what's out there. Just see who's hiring. And I don't know if I've seen the 0132, which is the intelligence field of the federal government. I've never seen a Capitol Police 0132 announcement on USA Jobs. Of course, it does seem like 2,500 isn't a large workforce, especially with a $530 million budget. But anyway, Josh, so capabilities that have been developed, FISA warrants, unmasking. You want to even touch on this or just end the podcast now? Let's just end it now, man. Let's just end it.
No, man, no, we gotta touch on this. We have to touch on this because this goes along with Capitol Police and opening up offices and the government not being accountable, by and large. So, I forget who sent the message, but it was 2 weeks ago. It's like, hey man, Tucker Carlson made the allegation that the NSA was spying on him. So by and large, everything that comes out of the media, I generally never accept the initial report, that the initial hot take, or breaking news. I see it, I'm like, okay, either it's significant, it's not significant, either I care about it or I don't care about it. I discard it. But when I saw that, so Tucker Carlson, some of the things I agree with a lot of what Tucker Carlson says. I disagree with, as like most, like most folks. I agree and disagree with everybody. But when Tucker came out, I try and run through. Okay, one, is it significant? Do I care? And then I try and think, okay, that person, have their in the past, would they something like this without the information to back it up, without them believing that it's true, because that's a very serious allegation to make. All right, so I took a look at it, and Tucker, there's someone with direct access to the information. NSA is spying on my private communications. I was like, okay, well, that's definitely significant. And and I go back, automatically thought back to when Trump, when candidate Trump came out and said, I'm being spied on, and everybody thought he was crazy. Everybody's like, oh, you don't know what you're talking about, you're crazy, you're just trying to get attention, blah blah. And then we all knew what followed with the Mueller special counsel. And guess what? Candidate Trump was right. He was being spied on. His associates were being spied on, because of FISAs that went up that didn't stand a whole lot of legal scrutiny in the aftermath. But anyway, so Tucker made that, and then comes back, and apparently, based on the information that I've seen, and Luke's got it, Luke's tracking it as well, Tucker Carlson was unmasked. Now, what is this masking thing? We've explained it before. We talked about it when we talked about the thing, with when we did the episode on General Flynn, retired General Flynn, unmasking. So the NSA and other agencies out there, communications, the intelligence and information that they gather, and they find in there a U.S. person. Person is committing a crime unless that involved in some nefarious activity, then they are obligated by law to protect that. They mask it, and to unmask it only in the most dire of circumstances. So it appears, as a journalist, reached out for an interview, which is not abnormal, right? Journalists interview all sorts of people. Even Luke was interviewed by journalists at one point. Interviewed Christine Amanpour has interviewed multiple people that we necessarily don't like. She interviewed Yasser Arafat, but maybe Yasser Arafat wasn't a terrorist because he had dinner at the White House with Bill and Hillary, and we would never bring a terrorist into the White House. So anyway, maybe he wasn't. I don't know. So apparently, the NSA, somebody in the NSA, Carlson, illegally, somebody the know within that information reached out to Tucker and it's like, hey man, the NSA spying on your shit, and by the way, they unmasked you. So this again, this is significant, political, 100% political. There is no Carlson is conspiring with Vladimir Putin as part of a criminal empire, a committee. There is absolutely no legal justification to unmask, and to do so is, it's significant, and I don't know how they're gonna walk this back. I don't know. Well, I do know how, because nobody's gonna hold them accountable. Because the people that should hold them accountable won't. Because this has become the new political weapon. This has become the new political capability. One former friend of mine, he now shows up in my People You May Know feed on Facebook. After it came out that, the Mueller special counsel was all BS and the FISAs were, altered to, everything, he was like, man, it's just politics. Um, left, very far left, Chris. Uh, just politics. Yeah, man, it's just politics. Against our political adversaries, it's just politics. Are you truly that stupid? This is not where we want to be. This is not where we want to be as a nation. Absolutely not. Though, I don't know. Keep there on that, Luke, probably. But
I don't think you did, because this is a complicated thing, and huh. If so I know some of the audience out there shares a lot of the same uh, qualities that I share. And one of my qualities is sometimes when Josh starts talking, my brain just shuts off, and I start thinking about Care Bears and pink elephants, and things like that. So I'll kind of not rehash what Josh said, but I'll give an example that might make it clear. Not that Josh's example was bad, but I'll just make another example. So let's say that I decide that I want to try to reach out to Hugo Chavez, because I want to get his, views on how, let's say I'm writing a master's thesis on socialism and how the social system, and government complete centralized control affects military budgets. Okay. And I'm writing this master's thesis, and I'm like, who better to ask than Hugo Chavez and his staff, maybe even his chief of defense, like his chairman of the Joint Chiefs. I'm going to reach out to them and see if they can contribute to my master's thesis here. So let's say that I reach out to them, and which can be done, by the way. Any one of you could do it. You could try. They're probably not going to get back to you. But let's say they take an interest. I'm at the Naval Postgraduate School or something like that. And I'm like, this is what my thesis is, and I'd really like your take on it. And how's your system better? How could it be improved? So on and so forth. And I get in touch with his staff, and their staff puts me in charge, or puts me in touch with, let's say, their chief of defense. I can't get to Chavez, or Maduro, because Chavez. I can't get in touch with Maduro, so they put me in touch with the chief of defense, who is willing to talk to me. Now, more than likely, since Venezuela is a thorn in our side, and I have no idea, I'm just assuming that their chief of defense is probably on the NSA's watch list. So the NSA, well, is tracking that person's communications, probably. So what the NSA will do is they'll get the fact that that guy with a U.S. person. When that report is sent up to the analysts to see what their chief of defense is talking about, all they see is this person was talking to a U.S. person. That's all they see. They don't see the name Luke on there. They see the name, or they see U.S. person. Now, if the analysts determine it's very important based on what this U.S. person said, it's very important we know who they are. And then they'll go to a FISA court, and they will, enact all the things they're quote unquote supposed to do to get that individual unmasked. So now, and they have to have justification for it. See, this guy, he's not just writing a master's thesis. He's saying, how can we implement the same thing here? And how can I get in touch with, they perceive it as a threat. So they take it before a judge, and the judge says, sure, yes, you can unmask him. You can know who he is, and you can start digging into that person's contacts, because they're now a threat. So I'm not going to say the fact is, because I know there are certain parts of this that we might be missing, and certain, aspects that may be muddy on both sides, but it sure looks like that Tucker Carlson was unmasked because he was trying to get an interview with Vladimir Putin. And somebody along the chain there was on the NSA's watch list, and somebody went. Now, I don't know what Tucker said. Maybe he did say something crazy that warranted him being unmasked. But my question is this, man, if it is all political, who is the person within the NSA making that call? Is it General Retired Nakasone? Is it him? Who is it? Who's making these calls? And what judge is signing off on it? And if the judge is signing off on lies, who's lying to the judge? It's just, it's unsettling, and I would really like more facts to come out on this. But like Josh said, they're not going to be held accountable. They're not going to be held accountable by the media in general. Which the good news on this is we're ahead of the curve. We're ahead of the curve. We're on the right. I hate saying this. I hate this term, but I really believe we're on the right side of history on this. Because Glenn Greenwald, the whole Snowden thing, he came out for Snowden, and he did some exposés on the NSA that was uncomfortable for a lot of Republicans and conservatives back in the day. This guy is all in on this story. And this guy is not a conservative. Glenn Greenwald is a dyed-in-the-wool liberal, and he is all about it. He's like, no, we need answers. If you don't know who Glenn Greenwald is, he's a prominent journalist. Now, he's not like, Peter Jennings, but that's the kind of media people are consuming now. They're not consuming mass market media. They're consuming Glenn Greenwald, liberal, Matt Taibbi, liberal, who is also all in against this. So it's like, hey, man, enemy of my enemy is my friend. I'm not saying those guys are enemies. I'm not saying the liberals are enemies, but I'm saying I do not align ideologically with these guys, but we're on the same side with this one. So we need answers. I don't think we're going to get them, but man, there's something's rotten in the state of Denmark, Josh. Something's rotten in the state of Denmark. I'm telling you right now.
No, 100%. And I would love nothing more than to see some actual journalists. Nothing more to see, regardless of what side they're on, the Greenwalds and those demand from the White House. I want to hear from the White House. Demand that Haynes, the director of national intelligence, demand they release who requested he be unmasked and why. If they come out, if they ask everybody, look, it's an ongoing investigation. They, Mr. Carlson is a subject, whatever. Then say it. But people need to demand answers on this, and I don't align ideologically with them either. But on this, I'm telling you, all these people out there that are championing it, they're like, yeah, whatever, it's no biggie, and the people are like, well, if you're not doing anything wrong, then, okay, all right, you want to go with that? Well, the police are going to come to your house and they're going to search your house, and you can't say no, because if you're not doing anything wrong, that's the dumbest.
You're next.
That keep thinking the alligator will eat you last, but eat you he will.
Josh, I used to say, now I didn't used to say it, but you grow up, you learn things, right? And I used to have that mindset that, well, I'm not doing anything wrong. I don't care if they see. That's not the point. I have inalienable rights granted to me by my creator. And those rights cannot be infringed upon by the federal government. It doesn't matter that I'm not doing anything wrong. It matters you're violating my rights. You're violating my rights. And it's specifically, our Constitution specifically says you cannot do that. And I cut you off, dude, but man, I'm worked up now.
No, dude, because this is going to feed into our next episode. This is going to feed into our next episode. And it's just, do not understand. You brought up a great point. Government did not give you your rights. They did not give them to you. They cannot take them away. They are endowed by our Creator, and they are inalienable. And, those people are like, well, according to the President of the United States, no, none of that's out. I mean, we can. I don't know if he's coming back on the 13th Amendment and, back in chains, or what's he going to do on that one? I don't know if he's going to say, well, yeah, I am going to quarter soldiers in your home. Hey, sorry about that suffrage thing. Yeah, we're going to, there's some things that go along with that too, that, not absolute, ladies. So you can't vote. It is, people have got to start up for their rights. People have got to call this BS out, and try not to curse, because we want to eventually try and make some money on this thing. But they've got to call this BS out. They've got to stop. everything. You lose due process for one, you lose it for all. And that's, as much as I hate, a lot of those criminals out there, as much as I hate, people who commit crimes against children who, do that, at the end of the day, they are entitled to due process. And I hope that, not guilty and suffer that fate. But it's just people, people, they don't understand them. They, the Congress folks looking at you, AOC. Now she does, only because she was ridiculed. She didn't even know the three branches of government. Let me show you a Schoolhouse Rock video. Because you don't even know the three branches of government and you're an elected official? It's like, are you crazy? Well, it's a week before she was, making buttery nipples and sex on the beach and whatever else, whatever other mixed drinks folks are drinking these days. I don't know. Those were the mixed drinks when I was coming up. I don't know if those are still up there. But it's just, it's, and people are, and dude, the more people, the more worried I am. No, it's insane, but it should not surprise. It should not surprise folks like us, because even, I die. Even during the Revolutionary War, Native Americans were Tories. Supported the crown, or whether they just, I just want to be left alone. My life isn't terrible. I don't necessarily support the crown, but I'm not going to stand up and fight against it either. Those were the vast majority of Americans. Those are also the vast majority of Americans today. It's like you posted Zuby's, tweet, his, 20 things he learned during, in the last year. He was spot on, man. Zuby was 100% spot on. The majority of Americans are okay with living under tyranny. They are.
To be fair, to us, as I was reading through, and I actually printed the list off. As I read through that list, I was like, this is genius. This is so great. So I was like, wait a minute, I've seen this somewhere before. So I printed off the list, and I put it up next to our episodes where we talked about this stuff, and my notes from all the episodes. I'm like, we have literally covered all 21 of these points on this podcast. So no wonder it looks genius, right, Josh?
Yeah. Hey, is Zuby listening to us? Is Zuby listening to C3?
Hey, you know what? That's a good point.
We need to reach out to him
about that. See, that's why you're a good investigator. That didn't even occur to me. It's like, where did he get this? Oh, great minds think alike. No, he probably lifted it from us, bro.
Hey, I think we need to, him up. And, with that, and be like, hey, man, you lifting this off our episodes? What's up? Why don't you come on and chat with me?
Yeah, if we could ever get Roger to transcribe our episodes, we could give him like word for word what we said and the date and the timestamp and all that. Be like,
Roger's too busy out stimulating. At least the good thing on Roger is he'll have a free place to sleep on it. Home. Maybe.
You think I don't know, man. I can see Roger right now as pampered booty. He's like, I got this motorhome, but man, I'd really like to sleep in a hotel tonight. I can see him parking that motorhome in a hotel
in the parking lot. I've seen.
So, go ahead.
I was gonna say I've seen 2 RVs parked in hotel park. My first thought is, okay. It's probably like the first timers they get out there. Right? They're like, yeah, man, this shit ain't gonna work. We're going. Come on, we're going.
I mean, I could see it if you were like, doing cross country 3 or 4 times. You're like, yeah, let's just stay in a hotel tonight. After day 45.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. You mentioned Avril Haines earlier. For those of you who haven't been listening to the podcast, Avril Haines is not to be confused with Avril Lavigne, Skater Boy fame. So, Avril. I got an idea, Josh. I say that we give our closeout to the podcast now, because there's a topic I want to cover in the freemium content. And I think you guys might want to hear it, because Josh and I go back and forth, and maybe we'll kind of tease a little bit of what we're going to do in some upcoming episodes. So I'm going to close it out and kick it to Josh, and he can close out the podcast, and then we'll switch over to freemium. I We had a lot of ground to cover, and it is going to be shorter because Roger's not bloviating on end, saying all these smart, Roger words and things we don't understand. So it is a little shorter, but we have had a little bit of a break. Hopefully, the next time we record, I will be in the roughly close to the same time zones as Josh and Roger, and we can turn over a new leaf there. We've been absent for about 3 weeks. It's kind of been a busy beginning of the summer for the three of us, and but we'll try to get on a more even schedule toward the end of the summer. So we appreciate y'all being patient with us. It's been a couple weeks since we had the last one. So Josh, last thoughts before freeming?
Yeah, man. Hey, thanks again to everybody out there listening. Thanks again to check him out, carltonjuice.com, Apple, and close it out with to Herschel Jericho. Hope you have a lot more. And to viewers out there, our freemium content starts now.
Okay, so I took down a note when we were talking about Joe Biden and all this stuff and holding people accountable and all these things. It's something we talk about from time to time. It's like Second Amendment, right to bear arms and all this stuff. And all Joe Biden's quote out there, it's not even a quote, it's basically what he says, like, hey, man, come on, man. You're going to go up against the federal government. You're going to need some F-15s and some nukes. Remember when he said that? I mean,
Yep.
Dude, I will give, what's his name, Fartman Swalwell a pass when he said, well, we've got nukes, because he is, well, at least Joe Biden at one point in his life had some neurons firing in his head. He's past his prime, but Swalwell's just a moron.
Yeah.
And Swalwell, it's like, okay, moron, I don't feel threatened by what you just said. But when the president of the United States is like, that's something big to say. Like, what's the context of that? Who do you think is going to, attack, with arms that you're going to have to retaliate against U.S. citizens? You're going to have to retaliate with F-15s and nukes.
Yeah.
I mean, to me, that was significant that he said that.
Yeah. No, 100%. And again, it was another one of those things. People are just like, oh, that's just old Joe. It's like, no, motherfucker. The United States, an elected member of the United States, who has been an elected member of the United States government for 50 years, who was vice president at one time, for 8 of those, just said, we have F-15s and nukes. It's like, and people are like, that's just Joe being Joe. It's like, no, that's the president of the United States saying that he is willing to use F-15s and nuclear weapons against American citizens. That should, like, what would Thomas Paine? What would Thomas Paine have said? Like, what would he have thought? Yeah.
What was the?
It's crazy, dude.
What was the standoff about land? It happened a few years ago. You remember the federal government? It was about cattle, I think.
Yeah, it was out in Oregon.
So were they going against the federal government? I think they were.
So and it was nuanced, but it was something about land for grazing their cattle, and the government said they could on like BLM land, dig into it, but I do. It was straight like
armed.
It was. Dude, a whole bunch of folks showed up, all kitted out, and at the end of, I forget how long they had that standoff for. It was a little while. Yeah, the ATF and U.S. Marshals and everybody. Yeah, man, like we're like this is not going to end well. Like we're gonna,
okay,
one in court. At the end of the day,
I'm trying to think of the threshold. Let's just leave nukes out of it. I mean, because nukes, that's just dumb. I mean, that's dumb. I mean, people deconstruct what he said. I'm not going to give him a pass because he's old senile Joe. It's just the president of the United States just basically said, I'm willing to use F-15s and nukes on U.S. soil if you go up against the federal government. Okay, what's the context? What are you talking? Waco. Should we have just pulled those agents back and flown in F-15s and just, a couple JDAMs and it's over? I mean, what's the threshold? Okay, let's say this. How about this? How about a couple years ago, I believe, when the border crisis went under Trump, some U.S. soldiers were temporarily detained by Mexican soldiers on the U.S. side of the border.
Yep.
It's a big misunderstanding, dude. I understand, dude. Shit happens. It just does. I don't blame the Mexicans for that. Just stuff happens, man. They're securing their border. We're securing ours, and stuff happens. But let's say Joe Biden came out and said, "Come on, man. Don't worry about those. Don't worry about Mexico. You're gonna go up against the U.S. government. You better have F-15s and nukes." Mexico would have called the ambassador immediately, called him to the carpet, and said, "What the hell is this guy talking about?" I mean, you can't just say words like that. Words mean things. I hate that term too. Words mean things. I don't like that. But in this case, it's like, dude, Joe, words mean things and mean.
No, 100%. At a minimum, dude, they would have demarched the United States at a minimum.
Oh, absolutely.
No.
Any country in the world.
Yeah, and rightfully so.
So we're talking about if you're in the freemium content now, we're gonna start like every fourth or fifth episode or so, depending on how we feel. We're gonna cover an amendment to the Constitution, and we're gonna start with the First Amendment, not because it's number one, but we might jump around a little bit. I don't know how much time, and we may roll a few together because I don't know how much time needs to be spent. What is it? The Fourth Amendment. I don't know how much time needs to be spent on quartering soldiers. Although there is some interesting history behind that, but we want to we have a lot of discussions about the Second Amendment. So I was thinking the other day, I think about the Second Amendment a lot, actually. And, we always go down that road of, well, what if the government becomes oppressive? What if we elect a Marxist, and we vote our way into communism, but we have to shoot our way out? What happens then? And Josh and Roger are always saying, well, I'll show you two examples, the Viet Cong and the Taliban. And, I think about that a lot. I'm like, yeah, how would that look? Because this is where I get your thoughts on it, but is, the Viet Cong had the support of the NVA, who had the support of China. So they had no joke support. The Taliban has very explicit support from certain elements within Pakistan. And I'm sure that there's covert support and stuff like that from different types of countries. There's probably so much stuff going on. But my point is they have external support. So if that was the case, where would our external support come from? You know what I'm saying? Because you need that. You can't just have a bunch of guns and it'll just be a war of attrition. It'll go on forever. I understand. But you're going to have some sort of support. So I was asking myself, where would that come from, I wonder?
Getting ambushed on the Second Amendment here. So
I'm not trying to be confrontational. It's more like theoretical. Like,
no, it's a great question and it's a great point. I don't know. Like I truly don't know. I think maybe once you got to the point to where, hey, there's actual armed conflict within the borders of the United States, I think you're going to have support internally. I think you're going to have a number of states, whether it be all the way down to municipalities. I think it's where your support from. I external support would come from, but the majority of your folks external support. I have no doubt that power China and other countries reach in. As we'll help you guys out, and you take that blood money happening by that's a whole nother can of worms.
On that. And it's looking less and less likely that we would be in a situation where there was a tyranny and all of a sudden there was this grassroots movement to violently overthrow it. It's looking less, that's, I think it's more like, I think we covered it last episode where it's like, now you got these states that are doing this. And I'm not saying it's going to come to conflict. It's not. But you're seeing a division is all I'm saying.
So I call it the national divorce. The national divorce is coming, and I don't see armed conflict.
Yeah.
But what I do
don't either.
see, I think you are going to have, and headed that direction as as people become more tribal, as identity politics and all that we've spoke ad nauseum about, is you're going to see the national divorce. You're going to see states come out and say, you know what, I'm either following that federal law or I'm not. And it's going to get to the point where states are going to be like, you know what, we're teaming up with some other states, and yeah, we'll decide if we follow your rules or not. I think you're going to see it on that level, and then you're going to see the federal government is okay. Well, we're going to cut off funding for X, Y, and Z, whatever. So I think you'll see that, and that's going to last for a very, very long time. I don't see armed conflict unless the federal government starts to mobilize troops against states, against citizens, and we're so far away from. Dude, even some of those on the, I think some of those they know, like hey, we can't do that. At the dude, and I don't know, maybe it'll be different, but I don't see the majority of the military that order. Even if it was given, they'd be like, yeah, man, nope, not a lawful. Not a legal or order, so guess what? I ain't doing it. I don't know. I mean, I got a lot of thoughts.
It's strange because I mean, I don't know. It's complicated because I don't see. I agree with you. Like your average, E5 is going to be like, hey, you're going to occupy New Orleans or whatever, because they're out of hand. But the average E5 is not going to be given that order. The average E5 is going to be like, you need to go secure this street corner and make sure you check all the vehicles going through. Roger. So, I mean, I don't know. But again, you could just, defund, all state police who are willing, or say, how about this? I'll give you a quick thing. How about this? How about the federal government comes out with and they even sign if Illinois, no, if Chicago is willing to disband their police force, we will fill their police force with Capitol Police or federal police, and they will enforce the law in the city of Chicago. Do you think that the rest of the voters in Illinois want to pay for that? But at that point, the voters in Illinois, they're paying for it, but so are the voters in Texas. So are the voters in Florida and Oklahoma and Georgia. So state bailouts, federal state bailouts, federal city bailouts. That could be a sticking point to, Texas, Florida, Oklahoma, so on and so forth, Wyoming, saying we're not paying taxes on that. And I know it's got to be voted on and everything, but you're gonna get a citizen out there. It's like, my federal dollars are going to what? Because they screwed up their city, I've got to pay for it. It's a lot of bad blood, man. A lot of bad blood. Mute. You
look at the Capitol Police. Hey, man, we're going to put them in, we're going to start putting them in Florida. And guess what? Those Capitol Police have federal authorities, and they're not accountable except Congress. It's like, really? Because that's the police and the military, those are the two entities that the federal government, as far as ideology and stuff like that, doesn't control. The left controls the media, and they've been trying to figure out a way, how do we the police force, how do we make that a tool of the left? Well, you defund it, you get a bunch of those, guys to quit and leave, and then you Capitol Police, and hey, we're recruiting in your area. We need more Capitol Police officers, and next thing, have a federal police force, in numbers, all around the country. It's, I don't know, man. Again, I'm not trying to be black helicopter guy.
Well, Lori Lightfoot, who rejected the Trump administration's offering of federal to help the problem with the violence in Chicago in 2020. She denied it. She's like, nope, don't need your help. She has now reached out to the Biden administration and requested federal help, federal police officers, as long as they're under the command of the Chicago PD. You know who else has requested help, Josh?
Who?
The government of Haiti has requested U.S. military help after their president was assassinated. I'm not laughing at that. After their president was assassinated by Colombian freaking mercenaries, those dudes are no joke, man.
Dude, they said they were, they were like, the assaulters were speaking Spanish and stuff like that. I was like, oh shit. I was like, that was some freelance dudes right there. Nobody in Haiti I know speaks Spanish.
The Dominicans aren't going to do that. You're not going to find. Maybe there was a Dominican on the crew, but man, that's straight up Colombian Rangers, dude. Straight up,
dude.
Man.
I love it. You know what we missed out on this episode that we could have done? Or well, we need Roger here for this one. We could have told the story about us when we were gonna fight.
So dumb. God.
We'll have to say we'll save that one.
I'd like to say I was drunk, but I wasn't. That's just so stupid. That's why I'm saying, full of piss and vinegar and just like chip on my shoulder. So stupid, man. God, I'm lucky.
Dude. So the we should have told that. We'll get that one in. We need Roger here though for that one.
Stay tuned, folks. We'll tell that story someday.
All right, man. This is gonna do it for all you folks out there. And keep those canteen cups full.